evening to everyone. Happy to see this on. Okay. I said good evening to everyone. We're happy and delighted that you're here. We're going to have an abbreviated membership meeting for this evening, and if we finish this, then we have to take care of some important matters. Now, I was expecting to have many more people because we sent out announcements to the churches and to the schools and so forth, but a lot of the people tonight at my church, and I'm sorry that I couldn't even attend, one of our vital members, Reverend Samuel Hopkins, is being funeralized at 7 o'clock. So that's where a lot of the persons that had planned to come are attending the funeral. And I'm pretty sure they said they're going to try to make it, but I know it's going to be a long funeral because he was a very dedicated person of the church for many years, for 25 years at Concord Missionary Baptist Church. But nevertheless, I had asked Dr. Campbell more than about a month ago if he would come. The Educational Committee is sponsoring Dr. Campbell. That is one of their projects. We have Education Committee, we have a Legal Redress Committee, we have Health Committee. There are 5 or 6 committees, and this is the ninth is the Education Committee. And I thought that after reading many of the things that I read about Dr. Campbell, that this would be useful in our area. So I know there will be people coming in a little bit later, but Jeffrey does always give us a hard time if we're not out here by 9 o'clock. He said he should take the key if we get out by 9 because we won't need a key anymore. So we're going to make him out a tail. Okay, so at this particular time, I would have our educational chairperson introduce Dr. Derek Campbell.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Tara Nazario. I'm the educational chair. This evening, I would like to introduce to you, I have the pleasure of introducing to you our distinguished guest from DLC Consulting Group, Dr. Derek Campbell. Derek Campbell has worked for 13 years in several public school districts as administrator and math teacher. Derek earned his doctoral degree in educational leadership from Rowan University in 2007. He has also earned a master's degree in school administration from Lincoln University and 2 bachelor's of science, one in mathematics education from the University of the District of Columbia and the other in electronics engineering technology from Capital Institute of Technology. As a consultant, he specializes in providing guidance, assistance, and personal development to businesses, educational institutions that aspire to achieve higher levels of productivity. In his practice, he deals with a wide range of challenges, which includes organizational effectiveness analysis, sustaining organizational effectiveness, organizational team building, cultural relationships, curriculum development, increasing student achievement, and decreasing student disciplinary infractions. Please help me welcome Dr. Derek Campbell.
I forgot to recognize our illustrious mayor. Did you want to speak first or say something? Oh, okay. Here, wait.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I don't want to be another statistic like Jeffrey Combs.
Before I get started, I want to make sure that everybody has a folder. Within the folder, you'll find a PowerPoint so that you'll be able to follow along, as well as some other information. At the end of the presentation, I would like for everybody to fill out the speaker evaluation form and just let me have it. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Green for inviting me here. I'd like to thank the NAACP for having me come to speak here tonight. My topic tonight is promoting positive racial teacher-student classroom relationships. Not everyone agrees that some of our youth are having a racial challenge in the classroom, and so I'm going to review some of those indicators first. This is the National Assessment of Educational Progress data, and if you look in reading for 9-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and 17-year-olds, minority kids lag behind the white students in those areas. This is also true for mathematics, 9-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and 17-year-olds. Okay. Also, the United States Department of Education reported that minority students are more likely to be suspended from school when compared to white students. And if you notice, the majority representation is our black students. They reported similar results in 2003. Okay. And if we look at suspensions now, what's interesting about New Jersey is they don't have to report suspensions according to ethnicity. But they did report in 2002-2003 school year to the Department of Education. This came out in 2006. And I made a comparison of the enrollment as well compared to the number of suspensions. And if you look, especially for black students, the suspension rate is very high. Okay. If we take a closer look at Perth Amboy, we notice the student demographics are majority Hispanic culture. Is that better? Okay. And if we look at the language arts statistics, the students lag behind the state average as well as the white students in this school district. Now, it doesn't show for 5th grade, and that's because they didn't have enough students that took the test in 5th grade to report. Okay? And it's the same is true for math and also suspensions. Now, even though there was a major decrease, suspension rate is still kind of high, and we know that most students in Perth Amboy are minority students. If we look at the high school, in regards to language arts, Proficiency Plus, the white students fared better at the school as well as in the state. This is also true for mathematics, and student suspensions are also high at Perth Amboy High School. And so some of these causes, according to researchers, are teacher discrimination, black and Hispanic student beliefs regarding teachers and schools, the racial challenges that schools present for minority students, as well as discrimination in the classroom. Researchers also report that there are cultural differences in verbal behavior, cultural communication styles, debating, group discussions. For example, the research indicated that Hispanic students or Hispanic people, they all like to make a decision together, and they will all talk at the same time until a decision is made. And so you can imagine how that may play out in the classroom when a teacher comes to the classroom with a different expectation. It's the same with black students. They like to have a group discussion, okay? I think that's why cooperative learning has become so important for our minority students. There's also differences in nonverbal behavior, standing difference, interaction styles, eye contact. For example, white culture, they're taught that you have to make eye contact, whereas in the Hispanic culture, they're taught if you're staring at somebody that's older than you, it's disrespectful, as well as in the black culture. So there are differences that teachers and students bring to the classroom regarding their culture, as well as nonverbal and verbal behavior. And so what is the solution? Well, we've tried multicultural education, teacher preparation. We've added a couple of classes to the curriculum of colleges, charter schools, school uniforms, No Child Left Behind, highly qualified teacher, in-school suspension. We've tried it all. The solution is promoting positive racial teacher-student classroom relationships. One researcher reported that having positive and caring relationships in schools increases resilience and protects children from academic failure, mental illness, drug and alcohol abuse, and destructive behavior and violence. Another researcher reported that black students believe their achievement increases when they have positive relationships with their teachers. They also believe that academic performance or poor academic performance results from teachers who lack concern for them and engage in negative gossip regarding them. Another researcher reported that black and Latino urban high school students believe their underachievement results when teachers lack caring interpersonal skills to develop positive relationships. And so with all this information, I conducted a study at a local high school, and I can't mention the high school, okay? And so the demographics were, for the administrators, it was 67% white, 33% black. The instructional staff was 95% white, and the student demographics was 60% Hispanic, 33% black, okay? 99% of these students qualified for free or reduced lunch. The student suspension rate was twice the state average for 3 consecutive years, and black students accounted for 45% of the processed disciplinary infractions, while only accounting for 33% of the student population, which means that in regards to disciplinary infractions, black students were overrepresented. Teacher-student interactions accounted for 70% of the discipline referrals, and within that 70%, most of the disciplinary infractions were classroom disruptions. And so this is the overall process that was used to promote positive racial teacher-student classroom relationships. And this is actually a self-organization process which was first developed by Margaret Wheatley, which I modified for this intended purpose. And the study actually began with 8 teachers and 8 students, okay? I interviewed 8 teachers, I interviewed 8 students. We talked about how do they develop positive relationships. You know, we talked to the kids about how they develop positive relationships. And so I took all this information together, as well as the statistical data, and I developed this diagram. This is called a systemic structure. And what happens is a systemic structure will tell us what the cycle is, what's causing whatever our challenge is. And of course, this challenge was classroom disruptions. And so a student would talk excessively, and this is all on your PowerPoint. And then we have disruptive student behavior. The teacher, of course, would ask for compliance, and it's either going to be verbal or nonverbal. And what we found was most teachers that develop positive relationships with students, they may give them the look, or they may give them chances and choices. Now, this was at this school. Okay? I don't know what they may do in a different type of culture. This was at the school that I worked at. And so if you you had student compliance, of course you didn't have a classroom disruption. But if you had student non-compliance, then you had the classroom disruption. Of course, the teacher has to submit a misconduct, which is evaluated by the AP. And so when the student was assigned a consequence, they decide to be either late for school or be absent for school. And so this can be a cause for student dropout, okay? Because if you're not having success in the classroom and you're, involved with a lot of discipline, what's the point of going to school now? I might as well find me something else to do. We also noticed that the more a student was involved in a classroom disruption, the more their grades decreased. And as a teacher, I've actually had kids that would work hard to get a D. And so now, if this child is a classroom challenge and they're working hard to get a D, this is going to show up in my test scores or my standardized test scores. And so that's a cycle that we have to deal with, and we have to rid the school districts of this type of cycle. Okay? And so that was the first step. And so I met with 8 teachers after that, and we started meeting. We met 5 times that year. And in the first meeting, we developed a personal vision, and then as a team, we developed a shared vision. And for this model, this is what gives us what we call self-identity. The information that was given to them was, of course, the case study results, and then there was a literature review on the student-teacher behavior and all those different aspects, as well as an urban student verbal and nonverbal classroom behavior. And so the output was improved racial teacher-student classroom relationships. And what we would do in those meetings is we would decide as a team what strategies that the teachers were going to go in the classroom and try to use with the students to work with them culturally. And they started doing wonderful things. For example, and it started validating what the district was doing. For example, they would do test-taking skills. Now, we assume that a teacher's going to do test-taking skills anyway, okay? But it added value when they saw that, it helped them out culturally, and they started excelling in their classroom. And so this was the entire process, and that's the model for it. Now, these are the results. There were 3 different categories of teachers. One category was teachers that participated in the whole process, okay? And this was the overall impact of the discipline in their school. There was a negative 297% change. That's how much their discipline decreased, okay? There were some teachers that we asked to come to our meetings and be speakers, okay? And they would speak on the processes that they use in the classroom. For example, there was one teacher, actually 2 teachers, that were having challenges with their 9th graders after lunch. And if anybody is a teacher, they know that the after lunch class is probably your worst class or your most active class. And so they decided to have the students and the teacher work together to make the rules in the classroom. And so discipline just stopped. Okay, that was one teacher. And so overall, they had a negative 200% decrease in disciplinary infractions. And then there were some teachers that just came to me and they wanted to know, Mr. Campbell, what's going on? What are you all doing? And so I shared the information with them. And they could do what they wanted with the information. And they had almost a negative 400% decrease in their disciplinary infractions. Now, this is the interesting part, okay? Open defiance decreased across the board for all students. And open defiance is when, say, a teacher asks a student to comply in the cafeteria. Pick your tray up and put it in the trash. And the student decides to make this a big scene in front of all the students and everybody in the cafeteria, and that's what we call open defiance. So there was a major decrease, and what that indicated was, and this is the total staff, But what that indicated was staff and students really started respecting each other. Okay? Classroom disruptions, there was a major decrease for the white students at the school, as well as there was a minor decrease for Hispanic students and a slight increase for black students and a small increase for Asian students. And then disrespect towards a teacher leveled out except for Asian students. And so when I looked at this data, it really alarmed me. You know, and I said, well, is this process really working? And so I divided the data according to teaching staff and substitutes. And if you look, it was actually the impact of the substitute teachers that brought the data all the way up. Okay? And it makes sense because the students really don't have the time to develop relationships with new substitute teachers. Also, you know, a substitute teacher, there's a different perspective. You know, I come into your classroom, I'm substituting today, do what I tell you to do, and I need for you to do it now, okay? Because these are the instructions that were left with me. So it makes sense. Now this is what was really important. The impact on student classroom achievement. Now for the teachers that just spoke in our meeting, they had decreases in every grade level across the board. The teachers that were given the information only, they had increases in assigning below average grades and decreases in assigning A's as well as average grades. But look at the teachers that participated in the process. The achievement in their classroom went way up, and students, you know, they were above average, most of them, okay? And so what it really speaks to is how we operate as educators, because what we will do is we will bring in people to speak and do professional development. We will give teachers information, you know, we'll give them books. But when we include teachers in a process that allows them to change, and to change without getting defensive, you know, a lot of times an administrator may say, well, you know, this was the strategy or this is the initiative that the district had, and you're not doing this initiative, so I'm going to give you a lower than normal evaluation. And so naturally, as a human, you become defensive, and then you go get your union rep, okay? And so now the change never happens, and the children are the ones who suffer, okay? I think unions are great. I think people's rights need to be protected, but we need to give teachers a process where they don't have to become defensive, where they can feel comfortable with change. They can feel comfortable that there will be no reprisals. And that's why this process was so important. It's a self-organization process, and I actually had very influential people on my team. You know, and when I say influential, they influence the culture. And they never felt defensive. As the administrator, when they decided that they wanted to attempt a certain strategy, even if it didn't work, because they had administrative support, you know, of course I could put the patch on, okay? But that's what the teachers need today. They need that process to be able to change. And so overall, we had a negative 5.2%, and this is after 1 year, a negative 5.2% decrease in process disciplinary accounts. Black students was a negative 4.5%. Hispanic students was a negative approximately 11%. There were decreases in open defiance for black and Hispanic students. Disrespect for a teacher decreased in regards to Hispanic students. Open defiance and disrespect for a teacher. And the teachers, this was the change in which they reported, okay? And so that's also another indicator that they were working with the kids. Now remember, this is a staff of 72 teachers, and only 8 teachers participated on the team. Benefits, of course, there's increased student achievement, decrease in student involvement in disciplinary infractions, parents, decrease in visits regarding academic and disciplinary challenges. And these are some of the, well, for teachers, there was increase in instructional time. And this is one of the quotes that a teacher gave me. Just a note to let you know that I felt that the promoting positive teacher-student class relationship group was a positive thing in our school. I personally wish more teachers were involved. I thought of it as a type of professional development, which it was, where sharing of ideas was the main goal. I think everyone likes hearing stories about other teachers and their students, and I know teachers like telling their stories. Okay? The most useful meeting was the one where we discussed academic disciplinary choices. I learned a couple of tips for allowing students to make choices, or at least controlled choices. Okay? And so that teacher was to the point where it wasn't, I'm just going to hammer you because you're a student and you're going to submit to my authority. You know, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to attempt to respect you as an individual. Now, it may not work out that way, but at least you can say, and you can go back and tell your friends that at least I did try to work with you. Okay? Another teacher wrote, I recently had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with a student. She was upset about the detention that I assigned for her earlier in the day. During our talk, it became clear to me that I had treated her unfairly. That's huge for a teacher to come out and say that to a student. We were able to resolve our issues because we both had mutual respect for each other. When dealing with students, sometimes it's best to be quiet and just listen to what they are saying. That could mean more to them than any advice or instruction. And I have one more. This is very important. This was a second-year teacher. There was information from the meetings I attended that helped with student relationships. The biggest item that stands out for me is when it was discussed that most students that are discipline problems also have failing or poor grades. I checked into mine. It was true. Several of my biggest offenders ended up getting classified as special needs. This is in high school. During the year, and they were moved out of my class. For those few that did not switch out, I changed my way of thinking and tried to get them to be more successful academically so their behavior would be less disruptive in class. I changed my way of thinking. And see, that teacher had a process that was non-punitive to change her way of thinking. And that's what has to happen. And there's some benefits for administrators, decreased time for processing disciplinary infractions, and increased opportunities for instructional leadership. You know, at the school I couldn't believe the discipline that was coming across my desk. And I said, something, you know, has to be done if I'm going to get in those classrooms and start, you know, giving those teachers the instructional leadership that they may need. So there's our solution. Cultural relationship training program that promotes positive racial teacher-student classroom relationships. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Dr. Campbell, I think we spoke briefly about this when I first arrived, and I think the model that you've used here to analyze teacher-student relationships is a good one for most school districts, but in a school district like Perth Amboy, and even in others where you have a significant ethnicity that dominates the school population, I think it's difficult to treat ethnicity along with race. And in this analysis, you treat the Hispanic ethnicity as if it were another race. And in fact, within the Hispanic community, you've got black Hispanics, you've got white Hispanics, and then you have, you know, olive-skinned or brown Hispanics, some, you know, who are distinct to each other. It would be interesting for me to try to understand how, you know, the analysis that's come out of this study would apply in a school where it's really not race, it's more about ethnicity. And we have a lot more school districts in New Jersey that, because of the ethnic diversity, are emerging, and how we would deal with, again, promoting better student-teacher relationships, because that's really the objective of your studies. How do we promote better student-teacher relationships? You know, to see a reduction of disciplinary action, because in doing so, we can promote better quality education. I mean, that's the outcome. I'm curious how that would apply to a school district like Worthingwood, where ethnicity is more of a factor than race. There's not a racial tension in the school district, but, you know, at times, there are ethnic challenges, particularly in a city where you have emerging ethnicities, waves of immigrations that come, you know, every 15 years. And while we think, you know, the student population might be stagnant for some period of time, it's ever-changing. Even right now, where you have a school district where, I don't know, I guess 85% of the students are Latino, but just in the last 10 years, the makeup of that Latino population has dramatically changed. I'm curious how, you know, that model fits, you know, when you're dealing with ethnicity.
Well, and thank you for your question. One of the most important things that I did was a case study. And what the case study did was to get all that type of information in regards to what their behavior was, what their behavior wasn't. We didn't, you know, I didn't sit down and say, well, you know, Puerto Ricans do this and Dominican Republicans do this. We didn't do that. We just talked to them and, you know, talked about how they promote positive teacher-student relationships in general. So we really never had the race discussion. We have more of a behavior discussion because it's the behavior that we're after to change. But what also has to happen is teachers need a frame of reference. They need to know what some of the researchers are saying. And one of the things about the Hispanic community is there's not a lot of research about their verbal behavior, about their nonverbal behavior, or even their classroom behavior. But it does help. One of the interesting things that happened was there was one teacher that complained to me that all the students in the classroom copied off each other. And so she was going to give them all an F, right? And so I said, did you look at the literature in regards to how they are taught to help each other? I said, these kids are trying to help each other pass your class. And, you know, even the research says they will copy answers if that's what's necessary to help each other. And so then I also said to her, but that's why it's important to have open-ended assessments. Because if you, and that's why I said, you know, a lot of times the process starts to validate what the school district is trying to get teachers to do. If you have open-ended assessments, they can help each other in regards to the steps, but they can't come up with the same answers. So it wasn't really, the discussions were not about race, they were more about the behavior. Any other questions?
I had a question about, you said you ended up having a meeting, I guess, with 8 teachers and 8 students?
That's how we began.
That's how it began. How did you pick those 8 students and 8 teachers?
Well, the 8 teachers were picked deliberately. Very good question. They were the teachers that had the least amount of classroom disruptions. Because I wanted to know what was it that they were doing. And then the students that were chosen were the ones who were involved in most classroom disruptions. So I wanted both ends of the spectrum.
The students have those teachers. If the teachers didn't have a lot of instruction, so those students weren't with those same teachers? Or were they with the same teachers?
No, they weren't with the same teachers. No. Yes, sir.
How many different school districts did you do this with? Was it just the one?
I've worked with one so far, yes. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
What role does nutrition, because I really feel like if basic needs aren't met, then the learning, there is a definite learning curve. And, you know, with the kindergarten breakfast programs being, you know, done after, I think, like maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, as you get into the high school, they're no longer offering the breakfast program. So, you know, even though they've eliminated the vending machines and that sort of thing to take out the sugar, there's still a lack of proper nutrition within the school systems. So I think that plays that's a big still a big issue, basic needs.
Well, even though my study really didn't touch on that, Maslow talked about the basic need is food. And if children are hungry, or if even people are hungry, they function differently. So you're absolutely right. Now, at this school, we had a breakfast program for the students. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, sir.
One more. And I think this goes along with what the mayor was even saying, how, for example, there's a constant change in ethnicity. And what I noticed on one of your diagrams, after you say that the positive response, but it seemed in one of them, for some reason, Asian students were totally unaffected by this. The black students were affected, and
Well, they were. The Asian students were affected.
yeah, right there.
Right here.
Right.
Actually, they had increases.
Yes.
And if you remember, well, when I conducted this study, I think there was a big shooting down in Virginia somewhere. There were some things going on outside. And so if I was going to look at this data, that may have altered it just a little bit. It also could have been that the teachers were becoming more aware of the total school population behavior, because sometimes, we can come to the classroom with certain values, and we may pay attention to one student more than we do another student. In the classroom, students that sit and be quiet are not noticed in regards to negative classroom behaviors versus other students. So that could be it also, heightened awareness. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Comment and a question. I was fascinated by this because it seems like there's a lot of comparable data here off the study. Are you going to continue to do this type of work at different schools? Have you considered doing it, here in Perth Amboy, or doing more research? Or
Well, that's my goal. I actually did send a grant proposal to Perth Amboy, and I didn't get a response. But that is my goal.
when you said to Perth Amboy,
Superintendent.
okay.
I sent a grant proposal for this process.
When did you send it?
It was back in November.
Okay.
Yeah. Back in November.
Have
Yes,
you
sir.
sent proposals to other school districts such as New Brunswick?
Yes, I've been out to Hutchinson, Kansas. I've been around. I'm actually looking to help school districts that I know they're having this challenge, and the trend in regards to the high rates of discipline as well as low student achievement continues. That's one. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So, how long have you been doing this?
How long have I been doing
Yes.
this? Well, actually, this is what I did for my dissertation. Okay, and so maybe for about a year.
And in that time, how many school districts have you reached out to?
Probably about 20.
And how many have responded?
None of them. There's an organizational dynamic that kind of goes along with that. So I'm not frustrated about it. But there are a lot of school districts that are looking for answers. Okay? And, if you're looking for an answer, I may have that answer. I know I have that answer. Because I don't just do this. I do student achievement, team building, an assortment of different things. Yes, sir.
I know in certain panelists, workshop facilitators, so on and so forth, every once in a while they don't have a problem handing over their PowerPoint presentation on flash drive. You have a problem with
Putting my PowerPoint on flash drive?
absolutely. But for me, brother, for me.
Well, you got a copy of it right here.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's a okay. I didn't.
Yeah, you got a copy of it right there.
Okay, all right.
No problem. Anyone else? Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't know if I'm going to approach this right, but I met a little boy that was about 9 years old, and he was put out of school for, I don't know what he did, but I said, why are you home this time of day? He said something like, I was expelled. And that didn't stop me. So the only thing I got out of what all the different things you said, which I didn't understand most of it, but when the teacher changed and like listen to students or, you know, are more concerned, and that's what I got out of it. If the teacher's mind changed about students, you know, just automatically put them all in one little group, you know, just looking at them as, well, they are from this area and this is why they acting like that. I can see this working for them to change. They need to change their way of thinking because a person is, they might like nutrition, they might be problems with in their home or whatever, but you shouldn't, you know, see all the people as the same. Do that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And
So when this, and it really bothered me, a child that young, somebody expelled from school, you know, meaning that you ought to have enough going on for you as an adult to deal with a child that young.
well,
But
and
I mean, you know, I don't know the basic, but the change in the teachers, the way that they think, should have been able to help that child. If this program was in that system.
well, as educators, we've always attempted to use strategies to benefit our children. I think the fallacy comes with the process, or the problem comes with the process. And like I said before, what is this? A lot of times we will bring people in to speak about a subject. A lot of times we'll give teachers information, but we don't give them a process to be able to look at our kids and say, well, you know, is this a cultural difference or are you just being disobedient in my classroom? And then when they don't have that process, like I said before, they go see their union rep. And so, you know, and I'm not trying to, you know, beat up on union reps, but it's a defensive organism because we all want to survive. You know, we all want to eat and we want to pay our mortgages. And anything that jeopardizes that, then we're going to take the steps necessary. And that's why the process is important. But you're absolutely right. You know, it gives teachers an opportunity to change, and then they don't have to, you know, feel like they've been degraded. They can feel like they've done something positive for our kids, and they can really feel good about it. Yes, ma'am.
The group that you did this study on, the school that they were from, what was the ratio of minorities to whites, and the student ratio as opposed to the teacher ratio? Were the dynamics the same? In other words, if there were 75% minorities in the student ratio, was the teacher dynamics about the same, or were there like 75% white students or white teachers and just 25%? You know what
There were 95% white teachers
95% white teachers.
and 60% Hispanic and 33% black.
Okay, now that was the teacher.
Teacher, students, and demographics. The majority of the teachers were white. They were 95%.
Okay, was the majority of the students white?
They were black and Hispanic. Only 1% of the students were white. Out of 700 kids, 1% is like 8. And then there were like 650 minority kids, 6 people.
And these improvements that you showed apparently affected the minority group more.
No, actually they affected the white kids also. They started doing better. They started getting involved in less disciplinary infractions. And that's what I really like about the process, because it doesn't discriminate against the kids, okay, in that school. That's what I really liked about it. And it was somebody that pointed that out to me in one of my presentations. If you look right here, they had major decreases in open defiance and did have an impact on it. It had a positive impact on it. That's the great thing. Nobody gets left out. Nobody.
Did you consider doing that in an environment that had, where the administration was mostly minority?
No, I haven't considered that.
Why?
I haven't found that school district. Now, and I don't mean to say that to be funny, but I couldn't find it because they don't report those type of statistics.
Why?
It's just not a requirement by New Jersey State Department.
I repeat, why not? If they require it everywhere else, if they check those numbers everywhere else, why don't they check them in New Jersey? You can't fix what you don't know is broken.
Absolutely, I agree with you absolutely, but you know, maybe the mayor can develop an initiative with New Jersey Department of Education. I don't have that kind of power.
I actually think that information is available because as a city, we're required to provide it to the state. It's not the Department of Education that we provide it to, it's the Department of Labor, and it's under the Equal Opportunity Act. I believe every unit of government is required to provide that data. You just wouldn't find it in the Department of Education.
Thank you.
It is
Thank
available.
you.
It is available.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna pull that Department of Labor.
Yes, sir.
Pull that up. But even if the demographics of the administrators are the same as the students, you still have to have that type of process. Because I can remember as a math teacher who's worked with minority kids for most of my career, you know, there's sometimes what I would be really hard on, you know, because I, you know, would say to myself, I know what it takes to make it out here, and I got to get you right. Now, somebody else seeing that may say, well, why are you so hard on these kids? It looks like you're discriminating. And if they said that to me, they would be absolutely right. So I don't think the teacher demographics is important. I think what's important is the process where teachers and administrators can look at these kids as a whole and say, what really works for them? You know, with all the cultural differences that I have, the different cultural expectations that I have, and then the different cultural expectations that they're bringing to my school. What is it that we can do so that we all win? And that's why we need that process.
I like that.
Well, thank you.
And actually, it's more an issue of staff development than anything else. And I think, you know, just to speak about the Perth Amboy School District, I know that that is an issue that has been at the top of the list of the Board of Education and the Central Administration in the city of Perth Amboy. They recognize the fact that the skill set that they provide to their staff is going to make a very distinct difference in the quality of education that's provided. And so staff development is a very big part of the development process in education here in the city of Perth Amboy.
I agree with you, Tony.
I think along with that, at the bottom line is what you had at the end there, and this has to do with even human nature, that it has to do with the ability to change.
And having that process.
Having the process. You can have the process in there, but you still have to be willing to adapt to that process, whether it's an individual, whether it's a group, whether it's the entire system. They have to be willing. You're presented with the information. You can lead them to water. You can't make a drink.